time to make our second block from The Wanderer's Wife. And our second block today, ladies, is called Perishing. My notes are a hot mess. Yours are all cleaned up. I cleaned them up for you. Please be very aware that I need you to read all of the instructions before you get started on this block. I've made a lot of changes. This, the author of this pattern, she cuts everything to perfect size. And unless you are a perfect sewer and know how to put something together perfectly right from the start, there's no room for error. So I've cut some things bigger so that you can do some trimming, and we're going to cover that today as we make our new block, okay? Here's the tools you need for this session. We need, of course, our rotary cutter. We need our 2 forms of cutting tools, please. We also, if you have one, you need a small mat that you can rotate, or you need a rotating mat. And I'll get into why this is important later, all right? And don't forget about this handy dandy Stripology ruler. I'm not going to show you how to cut out the rectangles and squares for your block this time. Follow the cutting instructions for those. This session is going to pick up with cutting everything on the 45-degree angle and sewing your block together. So first I want you to notice there's 6 colors in this block. I have colored my block in to represent those 6 colors. I've notated all of what the light, mediums, and darks are on your instructions, so when you read them, you'll understand. And then I went ahead and I labeled them because many of our pieces are actually the same size as one another. So without with coloring in your block and labeling the pieces for position, you shouldn't put them in the wrong spots, all right? So let's get started. The first thing we need to do today is A and E are what we start with. We're going to set that aside for just a second, okay? The next thing we need to cut on the, we need to cut on the 45 are going to be B. And this gets cut on the 45 just one time. Notice when I cut on the 45, I am lining up my ruler from point to point, just like this, and cutting on the 45. And we're cutting just the one time. So now our B has been done, and I'm going to put my little B sticker back on it. You know, they also make some ABC pins and ABC clips. If you don't want to do that and you don't want to use stickers, you know the little clips we use for binding, they call them binding clips. If you take a Sharpie, you can write A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever, on them. And it comes off with rubbing alcohol. So use the tools you already have, all right? So then we need to take C and cut it once on the diagonal. Do you see this line right here? We're going to lay that line right next, that's our 45 degree. If we're concerned about if we're getting a proper 45 degree and cutting point to point and not a little to this side or a little to that side, but thank God I gave you extra to use, you can actually line up the 45 on one edge, and then that will connect your corners. And then they are perfect. They're perfect. All right? So we're going to go ahead and stack those. Notice I don't stack them on top of each other. I don't know. It's a thing. You do whatever you want to do. But I like to see them separately. Know that I've got them all. Don't have to keep recounting. All right. Then I need E and D. But E and D are actually exactly the same size. And they're cut on the diagonal twice. So I'm going to just stack all 3 of them together and do them at the same time. All right. So I'm going to do this side, and here's where you're going to start to see why I love the rotating mat. Again, all mats rotate, right? We talked about that last month. All mats rotate. So even if you just have a little mat, take it out. It still turns. You don't have to go buy a special mat. Don't get me wrong. Of course, we have all this stuff, but they're not completely necessary. You can go ahead and use what you have. Just use a smaller mat. All right, we're going to line this one up and we're going to cut. And then we're going to rotate it 45 degrees. And then we're going to lay it the other side and cut it 45 degrees. And there we have it. In this particular case, I like that it happened like this. And the reason is each one of these makes a section of our block. So I want to stack these and keep them together so I don't have to be touching them more than necessary, causing fraying, all kinds of other things. And then we're simply going to put our sticker back on there again. And here's F. And F is once on the diagonal. I just moved it so I wouldn't cut my sticker. No big deal. You do what works for you. Okay, now all our pieces have been cut and they're in the positions that we need them to be in order for us to start putting our blocks together. All right? So here we go. Time for the block. I'm going to be using this mat, this ruler, and this rotary cutter throughout this entire block because we'll be trimming things down. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take A and E. And we are going to lay them in opposite corners. Remember, we've done this before, right? And what we're going to have to do is sew from corner to corner. Now, as you know, I have the wonderful Brother 3100. So I'm going to use my laser light for that. If you don't have that and you're not confident in sewing a straight line, be sure to mark it. Remember, we have all those fabulous marking tools. Just use your ruler and one of our chalk. Here's one. This one is water erase. You know I prefer the chalk. Love it very much. And let's go ahead and mark one with some chalk. This is one version of chalk, right? This is the white one. They also make them in little pencils, but they all work exactly the same way. If this is how you need to do it, here we go. We're going to, again, use our ruler to line up the 45 and simply use our chalk to create this beautiful line that we're going to follow. Okay? So now let's take it to the sewing machine. Let's sew it, and then we'll be back to do some trimming. Here we go. Let's go sew. All right. So here we are. Back at our machine. If you have the 3100 or not, make sure you put on an open-toed foot, not a 1/4 inch foot. Your open-toed foot is far better because you can see the lines you've drawn or the direction you're going. I always start with my needle down, as you know. I'm going to sew from corner to corner. Turn it around, sew the other corner. So what I'm doing is I'm sewing opposite corners right now. This way you don't have to stop and start quite so many times. Now I've got 2 of my corners done. I'm going to take my pins out. And remember, this is where we cut those triangles off before we press. So we're going to take our rotating cutting mat. We're going to turn these upside down, just like this. Now I know some of you are just going to take your ruler, put it on this seam, and lop it off, right? Because that's what you're used to. As I've taught in many other classes, I prefer to pull the base part of the block back using a 1/4 inch ruler or the 1/4 inch mark on your ruler right here. You lay that on the fold and cut. I'll show you why as soon as I get done. I want to do the other side while I have it here. I'm going to open it up, lay it down, use that 1/4 inch mark right there, cut it off. So here's why. Because now, when I iron this, I press this open and my base block has stayed in place. And with my base block in place, I don't get the distortion. And if, of course, I sew perfect, just like you, but if for some reason I hadn't sewn perfect at this particular time, this would fix that, because I can follow the base block shape and just get the rest of the triangle into my seam allowance on the next go round. So I'm going to press these and put the other 2 on, and then we'll hit the next step. Okay, look what we've created. How fabulous is that? It's fantastic. So here we are. We got this wonderful, wonderful block that's all ready to go. And notice I'm not perfect, but because I left that base block in place, I still know where my seam allowances go. Works every time. Try it on other blocks too. Just because they don't tell you to do it doesn't mean you can't do it. All right? So the next thing we need to put on is B. Ladies, this is called square in a square. That's what we're building. We're building multiple squares in a square. So the first one we put on with using our squares and sewing them and cutting them. This one we're actually going to use triangles. So the first thing you need to understand about proper placement of your triangle, because I have these bigger than what they need to be. I like the overlap in case you're not real good at centering it up. And I also really like the overlap because you can get a more accurate 1/4 inch trim if you do it this way. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to fold our triangle in half just like this. And finger press it. Just put a little crease in it. No big deal, just a little crease. Then we're going to take that crease and we are going to lay it on our block so the crease is even with the point in the block, okay? When that happens, all we have to do is open this up and pin it. And now our triangle is in exactly the right location. It's not too far to the right, it's not too far to the left. Notice we have these wings that hang over. If we followed the original cutting instructions, you would have exactly a 1/4 inch hangover on either side. Ladies, that's not enough for you to get a proper point when you're finished. I mean, hey, maybe you can do it. I can't. We're doing it this way. So now we're going to pin. And notice I'm following my base block, not my slightly off folded triangle. All right. And as you saw before, I like to do 2 at a time. If it doesn't get in the way of the block, there's no reason not to do 2 at a time. All right, we're going to fold this one. This one's actually a little easier. Yes, I would like to put it here, but you also have a crease in the previous triangle, right? And they should actually line up with one another, which would then line them up on the block. Here we go. Open this little bucker, just like that. Again, we're watching to make sure we're using our base block as our pinning. I'm going to sew this on, and then I'm going to fold it, leaving it just like this, and fold it to the new blue side, what is my new blue side, or we also call this B. okay, color B. So, and that's to keep the bulk down. We have too many seams going on this side, and if we were to fold them that way, none of our seams would lay very straight, okay? So, and all of my stuff has been previously best pressed. That's why I'm currently not best pressing in between each step. So, off we sew. Put my 1/4 inch foot back on. Don't forget to prime those seams, ladies. Look at that beautiful point. Ah, it's so pretty. And here's number 2. Just as beautiful. And why? Because we kept our base block in place. We didn't lose anything. All right? Remember, always pretty side out, wrong sides together when we're doing this pressing of our triangle, so that when we lay it down, we can open it up properly. Right here, remember to pin through the previous seam so that it doesn't flip over while you're sewing. See how we have this one going in one direction and we're about to sew over it? So we want to be sure that we pin in that seam. Yes, I love to get up and exercise too, everyone. But sometimes, if you can make it so your whole workspace is right in front of you, it just feels so rewarding to get your block done. Oh, another perfect point. I have one block. I have no perfect points. Oh, missed that one. Oh well, close enough. Okay, here's where it gets tricky. Here's where we have to trim this block to size. In the original instructions, she doesn't give you a size. I'm giving you a size. Your block should trim to approximately 4 3/4 inches square. It may be 4 5/8, which is right in there. Just be gentle with yourself, okay? It's supposed to be 4 3/4. But remember, if it's off by 1/8, we can sew that in. That can be within our seam allowance. So don't panic over that. So what we're gonna do is on this ruler, we have this 1/4 inch mark right here, okay? And we have this white line that runs through our ruler. It's on either side. But we need this 1/4 inch and white line. What we're gonna do is we're gonna lay our 1/4 inch on our point with our white line running through the block from point to point. Why, you ask? This ensures that we get a square block, or as square as we can get it, right? because our points will be lined up, which means that they'll be in the center of the block. And by putting this 1/4 inch, put it just to the outside of your point. Don't put it strictly on the point, because where you put that 1/4 inch line of the ruler, that's where you'll end up sewing. And if you put it right on the point, you're going to lose the point. So we're going to put it right here and line up that white line, and then we're going to trim. Okay? Now, I know a lot of you would then go around to the other side. We can rotate this cool mat and do the other one, lining it up with the same line. Ladies, don't panic with what's going on the other side of this block. This is what we're worried about, okay? This is what's important. Everything else is being sewn to something else. It's irrelevant right at this moment. So we want to line up this block. Now we're going to do the other two sides. So for those of you who have every idea of what I'm doing right here, you're basically cutting a 1/4 inch from your point so that you can maintain your points and acquire a perfect block. Okay? And our block, oh, look at that. We have a 4 3/4 inch block. All right? That's what we're looking for. And notice when you look at it on the mat, even though while I was cutting it, it didn't seem like I was going to have a square block because of there's distortion in the sides you haven't cut. But look, I have a perfectly square block, and it's 4 3/4 inches. All right, here we go. On to the next one. So the next part we're going to do is we're going to add C. C is added in exactly the same way. All right, you put it on, we're going to fold those corners, and we're going to put it on in the opposites, just like before. Fold this in half, pretty side out. And line it up now with your blue. Open it up. Sew and trim. All right, we're going to do that again. So, for the purposes of our day today, I have already done that. So here I have one. I'm going to press it open. We're going to trim the same way. I'll trim all 4 sides, just like we did before. And we have, after pressing, a 6.5 inch block. All right, so this one needs to finish 6.5. This is where we're at. Here comes the hard part, ladies. This is where we have to build that 3-piece triangle. If you don't re-watch any part of this video, I'm fine with that, except this part. Here's the problem, and I've given you extra instruction. You're gonna make 4 of these units. The unit looks like this. You have a blue, you have a D, and 2 E's. In the colors of your choosing. In your picture, it looks like she has sewn these together. If you sew these together like this, they don't fit. They don't fit at all, okay? So what you have to do is start with 1, and there should be a 1/4 inch overlap on your point. To verify, you want to get out your ruler and make sure that from the point to the next piece, there is a 1/4 inch overlap. That 1/4 inch overlap is accounting for your seam allowance, okay? So what we need to do is pin it right at that spot, and I'm going to show you what happens. Now, after being sewn, look at two things. One is my seam starts at the intersection and ends at the intersection. That's because of the overlap. If I didn't do it that way, I would lose part of my pieces. And when I press this, and I'm going to press it to the top piece because there's going to be bulk in the corner. Look at my pretty top. Isn't that lovely? Now, just for argument's sake, I'm going to make one where it's laid out like the picture shows you without the instruction of a 1/4 inch overlap and show you what happens and why that is not the route we want to take. So look at that. I'm lining them up perfectly on top of each other, which if you're new to this, that would be your assumption, that you would just line them up on top of each other. You ready to see what happens? Nightmare. Look. First, just look by taking a look at the blue. Now when I open it, look what happens. We've lost part of our triangle on each piece because it doesn't match. Do you see the difference between these two? Look at this. Here, our waist is in the tail. Here, our waist is in the triangle. The tail has been sewn in, okay? We don't want that. We want it to look like this. So please, overlap by a 1/4 inch. Here comes the next one. I'm gonna put it on like that. I'm gonna take my ruler and ensure I have a 1/4 inch. I've done this a bit, so I can almost eyeball a 1/4 inch. But again, she's got these cut to perfect size, so there's no room for error. And I had you cut them to the exact size you need, because if we don't, we have to have more overlap. We can't trim these. Trimming them would lose our points again. So instead of doing that variation, we're just gonna go ahead and make sure that we have a 1/4 inch overlap. Okay. You can even see that it's joined at this intersection. Look how pretty that happened. And there's our unit. All right. So I'm going to make 3 more of these, and then we're going to apply them to our block. All right, we're back. We got 4 of these ready to go. We're going to put these, we're going to sew these on. So there's a huge amount of bulk right here that can really intimidate a lot of people. I want you to understand there's 2 ways to verify that you have your block centered properly. One is that the stitch line right here lines up with the fold line in the previous block. See how our stitch line runs with it? That ensures that our points are even, okay? The other thing you can do is put a pin through your point and make sure that your points are on top of each other. Remember, I said if we have to work within that 1/4 of an inch with some variance, go do that. What's important is that it lines up with one another. You can also look here, and this little tail should be even with the previous little tail. So I'm going to call that good right there, and I'm going to put a pin in it. If you haven't tried these new handy dandy pins, you should. These tops are iron heat resistant, and the handle on them, the little ball, is not round. It's actually more like a cone, so it makes it easier to hold. Sew this on with our 1/4 inch. Don't worry about the overlap on the edges. We've got to use that when we sew the other side on. All right, here we go. Not bad. I'm going to press it open so you can see. Ladies, I don't get all bent out of shape. Remember, about a little bit of variation. This seam I'm opening because we have 2 points coming together, right? So I want to open this seam up to avoid bulk. And that's what that bad boy looks like. Oh, isn't that cool? All right, we got to sew the other 3 on. Here we go. Prime the seam first. Don't just start pushing. Love this wool mat. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm working on a wool mat. And the wool mat, your seam gets buried into the wool mat. And look at how flat it gets, even with all of those lumps and bumps. You've got this flat seam because there's pliability in the wool mat. It's just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Notice I slow down when I get to the point. I do that on purpose so I can watch exactly where the stitch is going so that I don't cut off that point. Sometimes you have to take a slightly smaller seam allowance when you have that much bulk, but you don't want to take smaller seam allowance in the rest of your block. So it's very helpful if you just slow down. Okie dokie. I think I might give that puppy just a little more love on this side. A lot of seams in this one. All right, here we are. All we have left is to put F on the corners. And how we put F on the corners is just like before. We're gonna fold it in half. I happen to be using a batik. You can trim all these little points off if you want to. I'm not going to. I'm gonna be trimming when I'm done with F because F is cut larger again. We're gonna fold it in half, finger press down the middle, lay it on our point just like that, and look at this. It should line up with this point and this point, and then open it up. Put your pin in the center and then put your pins in the seam on either end. If you need more pins than that, that's fantastic. You know me, I love me a pin. But make sure that those three things are for sure pinned. Outside of that, it's optional. Okay. Take this to the sewing machine and finally get a look at our finished block. Well, almost finished block. But I've been dying to get this purple color on here so I can show you what it looks like. Again, we're pressing out. We're pressing to that purple piece because it doesn't have any seams in it yet. This is its first seam, so it'll lay much flatter. Oh, so pretty. Two more. Two more. I thought I loved my last block, ladies, but boy, I love this one. Yes, I do this every time. I've been sewing since I could walk, and I still do this every time. Some things just work. There's no point in changing it. All right. So now that that's done, it's time to just simply trim. This time, when we trim, we're going to go to the big mat because I need to use a longer ruler, and I'm going to use several markings. All right, it's time to finish up our block. Notice in your instructions, she gives you the finished block size, 9 inches. That's the finished size, not this size. This should be 9.5, so that when it's sewn into the quilt with its 1/4 inch, it then is the 9-inch finish. So what we're going to do here is we are going to measure, finding a straight line. I don't care which line, but a straight line that lines up with the edge of your ruler and with the seam. Here it happens to be 1 3/4 is what I'm going to use to trim my block. Remember, I'm not worried about the rest of the block. I'm worried about this part I'm cutting. That's it. And when you're squaring a block, we want to take it equally from all parts of the block, not just from one side or the other. All right, did we end up with a 9.5-inch block? Let's check that bad boy out. Look at that. We have a 9.5-inch block. There it is. Have fun. Can't wait to see them all. Email them to me, text them to me. You have my cell phone information, So if you have any questions, let me know. Isn't it great? It's so pretty. Have a great day. See you in a month.